You don't need to be calm to be strong, and you don't need to be forceful to be steady. Strength is often misunderstood as tension, as effort, control, or the ability to push through. But there is another kind of strength, one that doesn't tighten, one that doesn't brace, one that doesn't announce itself. It feels quieter than what most people call power. And because it's quiet, it's often overlooked. If you've been holding yourself upright through will alone, managing emotions, managing energy, managing expectations, there may be a subtle fatigue underneath it all. Not exhaustion from action, but from holding yourself together. This is where still strength begins, not by adding anything, not by trying harder, but by noticing what remains when effort softens. Take a moment to feel your body as it is right now, not how it should be, not how you want it to feel, just how it is. Notice the places that feel solid, the parts of you that don't need attention, the areas already doing their job without asking for help. That quiet reliability is strength. You don't have to activate it. It's already active. Often, what weakens us isn't lack of power, it's unnecessary movement around the center, over-correcting, over-explaining, over-preparing. Still, strength doesn't rush to respond. It doesn't need to prove itself. It holds. If there's a sense of pressure in your life right now, decisions, responsibilities, expectations, notice how your system responds. Do you tighten? Do you lean forward internally? Do you brace for impact? You don't need to change that response yet. Just recognize it. There is a difference between being ready and being rigid, and there is a way to be unmoved without being closed. That's the kind of strength we're touching here. Not the strength that pushes outward, but the strength that remains even when nothing is being done. Stay with this quietly. We're not building anything. We're noticing what doesn't collapse when nothing is added. Strength becomes visible not in movement, but in what does not move when pressure appears. Containment is not holding tension. It's the absence of leakage. It's the difference between gripping the ground and simply being heavy enough that nothing needs to be gripped. If you notice how your body holds itself, you may find places where energy rushes forward, towards speech, action, explanation, reaction. That forward pull often feels necessary, protective, responsible, but it also drains strength. Containment is what happens when energy no longer needs to escape the center to feel effective. You don't need to stop the impulse to move. Just feel where it originates. Notice the center of your body, not as a point you must locate precisely, but as a general sense of gravity. Somewhere low, somewhere steady, somewhere that doesn't rise or fall with thought. When attention rests here, there's often a subtle settling, as if something stops spilling outward. This is not restraint imposed from above. It's alignment from within. Containment doesn't make you smaller. It makes you harder to move. Pressure can come and go without pulling you with it. You don't need to anticipate what's next. You don't need to prepare a response. Still, strength holds space without scanning for threats or rehearsing outcomes. If you feel energy wanting to rush forward, let it pause inside the body, not blocked, not suppressed, simply held. There is no urgency here. What is contained does not disappear. It gathers, and what gathers naturally becomes powerful without needing expression. Stay here a little longer. This is not effort, it's composure. Weight is not heaviness, it's presence that doesn't float. When weight is missing, the body compensates with tension, the mind compensates with urgency, the voice compensates with explanation, Still, strength doesn't compensate. It settles. Notice how your body relates to the surface beneath it. Whether you're sitting or standing, there is already support. You don't have to search for it. You don't have to improve it. Just feel how contact exists without effort. Weight is the willingness to let support do its work. When weight drops naturally, something subtle happens. The need to manage disappears. You may notice your breath deepen without being guided. Your shoulders soften without instruction. Your attention widen without drifting. This is strength returning to its base. Weight keeps you from being pulled upward by thought or outward by emotion. It allows intensity to pass through without destabilizing the center. You don't need to ground yourself deliberately. Grounding is what occurs when nothing is being resisted. If the day has required you to stay alert, responsive, or on edge, weight may feel unfamiliar at first. That's okay. Still, strength doesn't force the body to relax. It gives the body permission to stop hovering. Let yourself arrive fully where you already are. There is no need to lean forward internally, no need to brace. Just allow gravity to be enough. This kind of strength does not announce itself, but it's unmistakable when present. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be faked. It is felt. Stay with the sensation of weight without adding meaning to it. To be unmoved does not mean to be unaffected. It means you are no longer carried away. Life can still touch you. Circumstances can still change. Emotions can still arise. But they no longer displace your center. Unmoved strength is quiet confidence without commentary. It doesn't resist experience. It doesn't absorb it either. It allows what comes to arrive and pass without altering what remains. If you've ever noticed moments when something intense happened and yet you stayed surprisingly steady, that was not luck. That was this strength. It doesn't come from thinking clearly or controlling reactions. It comes from not leaving yourself when pressure appears, when you remain inside your own body, inside your own weight, inside your own presence. Events lose the power to scatter you. This doesn't make you indifferent. It makes you available without being vulnerable to collapse. Unmoved strength does not rush to restore balance. It trusts balance to reassert itself. When interference stops, you may notice a sense of space around sensations, as if there is room now where there used to be friction. That space is not distance, it's stability. There is no need to harden, no need to defend. Stillness itself becomes the anchor, and from that anchor, movement. When it comes, will be clean, unforced, appropriate, nothing extra. Stay here briefly. Let the feeling of being unmoved to be simple. Authority does not come from volume. It doesn't come from certainty expressed outward or confidence performed for others. Quiet authority is felt before anything is said. It arises when your presence is settled enough that nothing needs to be added, to be taken seriously. This kind of authority isn't asserted, it's recognized. You may have felt it before, in someone who speaks slowly or not at all, yet changes the room simply by being there. They don't posture, they don't convince, they don't explain. Their center is intact. Quiet authority comes from alignment, not dominance. It's what happens when weight, containment, and stillness remain coherent under attention. Nothing leaks, nothing reaches. There is no need to claim space when you already occupy it fully. If you notice an impulse to clarify, to justify, to correct misunderstandings before they arise, just observe that impulse. It doesn't need to be followed. Still, Strength does not anticipate being challenged. It doesn't prepare defenses. It trusts its own coherence, and coherence is persuasive. Without effort, you don't need to convince anyone of your position, internally or externally. When your presence is whole, let that be enough. Authority, in this sense, is simply not abandoning your center. When attention turns toward you, stay here. Endurance is often mistaken for persistence, for pushing through fatigue, or overriding limits. But true endurance does not strain. It doesn't grind. It doesn't demand. It continues because nothing is being wasted. When strength is held quietly, there is no friction between intention and action, no internal argument, no resistance that needs overcoming. Endurance arises naturally when effort is unnecessary. If you've ever noticed how exhaustion appears, not after doing too much, but after doing things against yourself, you already understand this. Still, strength does not fight time, it moves with it. It doesn't hurry to finish. It doesn't tense to maintain pace. It simply remains available. This is why composure outlasts intensity, why restraint outlasts force. Endurance comes from staying aligned rather than staying driven. You don't have to hold yourself together. You don't have to brace for what's next. When your center is stable, continuation requires very little. Life can place demands on you without draining you, not because you've hardened, but because nothing is leaking. Rest and action no longer oppose each other. They support the same center. This is sustainable strength. Not impressive, not dramatic, just present. Stay here for a moment. Nothing needs to be concluded. Still, strength doesn't arrive at an ending. It simply remains when nothing is being held up artificially. What you've touched here is not a state to maintain or a posture to remember. It's what is already present when interference softens. You don't need to carry this forward deliberately. You don't need to apply it to life. If it is real, it will remain on its own. As you return to movement, to sound, to the next moment, notice how little effort is required to stay centered. Strength does not need rehearsal. It doesn't need reminders. It expresses itself naturally. When you don't leave yourself, there is nothing to protect, nothing to defend, just a quiet coherence that continues without asking for attention. Let this settle in the background of whatever comes next. You don't have to hold on to it. Stillness knows how to stay without being watched, and strength, the kind that lasts, never needed force to begin with. Allow yourself to move on gently.